Horrible tragedy of the two National Guardsmen being shot by an Afghan national migrant is now being used to justify U.S. re-entrance into Afghanistan. Just a few days ago, the White House Instagram page posted this. They stated Joe Biden owns the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. CENTCOM Commander General Kurella testified Afghanistan is a hotbed for terrorism, and the U.S. has limited insights into Afghanistan due to withdrawal. This was just posted 3 days ago. Now, this is not the first time, of course, the United States has been speaking about Joe Biden's withdrawal, the Trump administration from Afghanistan. But what we're seeing now is we had that attack on the two National Guardsmen by an Afghan migrant that is now being used to incite and push for propaganda. Because what's the Trump administration currently want? Well, they want to reopen the airbase that's in Afghanistan, a U.S. airbase. Why? Because Afghanistan has a border shared with China, and the United States wants to be as close to China as possible. Regardless of what they will tell you, the truth of the matter is what's happening right now is the United States and the Western media is beginning to excessively push this Afghanistan terrorism rhetoric in order to justify re-entering and plopping their airbase and having troops go back there so that way they can have an airbase in Afghanistan that's close enough to China. Why? Well, because also, aside from the fact that China is a U.S. enemy state, by having an airbase right there, the United States wants to have eyes on China's nuclear weapons development. What a perfect scenario. So now what we're seeing is this sort of we're seeing the propaganda campaign going on to justify this. I'll go ahead and share my screen here. I want to show you guys an article. This was just from a couple months ago. So, like I said, this isn't anything new. This has been going on and this has been in talks. But now there's the perfect opportunity to use the most recent tragedy as an excuse to explain why we need to re-enter. So, U.S. is seeking to regain control of Afghanistan's Bagram Air Base, says Trump. Bagram Air Base. U.S. president suggests he is negotiating with the Taliban for American forces to once again occupy the base. So this has been going on. The Taliban stated they don't want Americans to re-enter. They stated it was an absolute no. The United States is seeking to retake control of Bagram Air Base. Let me go ahead and scroll down a bit so you guys can see that. From the Taliban, Donald Trump said, bringing back a key strategic asset that was surrendered during the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. The U.S. president suggests he was negotiating with the Taliban for American forces to again once occupy the base, formerly the largest military site in the country and an important regional foothold because of its proximity to China. His comments against China will alarm Western allies, who have been carefully watching the relationship between the two superpowers carefully amid fears that heightened tensions could lead to further economic turbulence and even military skirmishes. Again, just a couple of months ago, this article was put out, and here's another one. This one was put out also this was back on September 19th. U.S. in talks with Taliban. Let me go ahead and edit it so you guys can see it. U.S. in talks with Taliban returning counterterrorism forces to Afghan base. And the article says very similar stuff. Taliban officials haven't agreed to the proposal, which is part of wider talks with Kabul officials on reestablishing ties. And what we see here is a photo of the Afghan air base from back in 2021. So there's always a reason. Whenever you see media headlines and they're really pushing for a specific propaganda campaign, or you're just seeing it one after another, there's a deeper reason as to why they're doing it. So the tragedy that happened with one National Guardsman being murdered by a psycho that was an Afghan migrant, with that event happening, which was a horrible, disgusting thing, it's being now used in order to justify something completely different, which is in order to get a U.S. base plopped in back in Afghanistan in order to border with China. I'm not saying how I feel about whether or not a U.S. base should be there and whether or not it aligns with American interests. I'm just saying that people need to wake up to see what the deeper motives are. Because when the government tells you one thing, I promise you, it has nothing to do with what they're trying to tell you. And it has everything else to do with an ulterior motive, which is what we're seeing here. There's also that video that I previously showed of an Afghan migrant. Many people have to also recognize that this recent attack, terrorist attack, genuinely on these two National Guardsmen by this Afghan migrant, he wasn't just a random migrant here in the United States through any normal U.S. immigration process. He worked with the CIA in Afghanistan to overthrow the Taliban, and he was brought back into the United States on a specific program that allowed CIA mercenaries, individuals that worked with the CIA, to enter the United States and receive eventual citizenship. That is the program that this individual was brought into the United States by. So there were others that were like him that also worked and cooperated with the CIA and that were brought here to the United States that are Afghanis. And there was a previous video that I shared on in a few of my last videos where you see an Afghan and he goes off on an officer right before shooting the officer while he's sitting in his car, and he's clearly mentally disturbed. And he's talking about how he should have sided with the Taliban. He's saying some crazy stuff, and you could see that this man is just messed up in the head. And then he just ends up pulling out his weapon. The reason that they're so messed up in the head is because they're working with the damn CIA. Some of them trained at a very, very young age. The recent attacker that shot the National Guardsman, he was 29 years old, is what I was reading in the articles. He worked with the CIA prior to coming to the United States, and he was working with them, I believe it said about 15 years. So it would have placed his age that he started working with the CIA and being trained by them around 15 to 16 years old. So they're being trained very, very early to do these things overseas in their home countries. They come here, clearly it affects them in some sort of way. They're not in a good mental state because of the things that they've been put through. And then the CIA uses them again in order to justify another thing they want to do, which is reopening their base in order to have a U.S. asset close to China to monitor a U.S. adversary. That's how this operation all works. And we just go along with it. And most people that are, your standard day-to-day citizens are busy with their lives and they have a lot of other things going on their plate. So when they pick up a headline and they read a headline on the Washington Post or the New York Times, they take it at face value, and it is what it is. And they're not really looking for the deeper ulterior motive or whether or not there's actual propaganda or government justification for something else. So that's kind of the situation we're in. I'll keep you guys updated as things unfold moving forward. If you found this video interesting, make sure to go ahead and click the subscribe button below and give this video a thumbs up. It really does help my channel grow and reach more people. Otherwise, I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care. Bye.